The door swung open with a groan that echoed like a judge's gavel, catching the dim light from the hallway and slicing through the heavy air of my room. My lips were still pressed against Lena's, her breath warm and hurried against my skin, the world narrowing to the frantic rhythm of our hidden world crumbling in an instant. Alara stood there, her silhouette rigid against the threshold, eyes wide not with fury, but with something sharper, a recognition that pierced straight through me, leaving me exposed in ways no scream ever could. I pulled back from Lena, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird, the taste of her lipstick lingering bitter on my tongue. The room felt too small suddenly, the walls of our shared apartment in Monroe pressing in with the weight of all the secrets I'd buried under floorboards and forced smiles. Lena scrambled for her shirt, mumbling apologies that dissolved into the shadows, but my eyes stayed locked on Alara. She was my roommate of 6 months, the woman who'd answered my frantic ad for a cheap place to crash after my last lease fell through, the one with the polished southern drawl and the family name that opened doors in this town while slamming them shut for folks like me. Claire Hargrove, 28 years old, high school English teacher by day, ghost by night, hiding in plain sight in a place where the Bible belt buckled a little too tight around your throat. Alara didn't scream, didn't bolt. She just closed the door behind her with a soft click that sealed us all in together, the sound hanging like a held breath. Lena slipped out past her a moment later, casting me a look of pity that stung worse than judgment, her footsteps fading down the creaky stairs of the old Victorian we'd rented half of. I sat there on the edge of my bed, sheets tangled around my waist, waiting for the storm, the accusations, the eviction notice wrapped in scripture quotes. Monroe wasn't forgiving to women who loved wrong. It was a town of cracked sidewalks and Confederate ghosts, where the river ran slow and muddy, carrying away dreams that didn't fit the mold. But Alara crossed the room instead, her bare feet silent on the worn oak floor, and sank down beside me. Not too close, but close enough that I could smell the faint jasmine of her soap, the one she'd bought at the farmer's market on Sundays when we pretended to be just two women sharing grocery lists and bad TV reruns. "I've known," she said quietly, her voice steady as the Mississippian flood season, though we were miles from it here in Texas Panhandle country. "Not the details, but the way you look at the world, Claire. Like it's a book you can't quite finish reading." I stared at her, my throat dry as the summer dust outside. Known? The word unraveled me thread by thread. I'd been so careful. The late nights at the library pretending to grade papers, the drives to Lubbock for those anonymous hookups that left me hollow, the photos of family back in Austin tucked face down in drawers. My parents had raised me on stories of grit and grace. Dad a ranch hand who quoted Faulkner like gospel. Mom a nurse who patched up the town's broken hearts without asking why they beat crooked. But when I came out to them at 22, fresh from college with a degree in literature and a girlfriend named Riley who'd already skipped town, they didn't disown me. They just faded. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. Monroe was my fresh start, or so I thought. A teaching job at the local high school, a salary that barely covered rent, and a vow to keep my truths locked away until I could afford to leave. Alara's hand hovered near mine, then dropped to her lap. She was 26, with that effortless poise that came from growing up in the big house on Elm Street, the Beaumont's only daughter, heir to a cotton legacy that had weathered the wars and the scandals. We'd bonded over the mundane at first, her complaining about her mother's endless matchmaking, me nodding along while hiding my own ghosts. She baked cornbread on rainy days, and I'd read aloud from my worn copy of The Color Purple, watching her face soften in ways that made my chest ache. But this was the line we'd never crossed, the one I'd drawn in the sand of our shared bathroom mirror. "Tell me," she said, turning to face me fully, her hazel eyes catching the lamplight like polished amber. "Or don't. But don't think you're the only one carrying something heavy here." The rain started then, pattering against the window like impatient fingers, blurring the streetlights into halos that mocked the clarity I craved. I wanted to laugh or cry, or bolt for the door myself. Instead, I whispered the truth, the one that had festered since I was 16 and first kissed a girl under the bleachers at homecoming. It's not just tonight. It's every night. Every time I smile at parents' night and wonder if they can smell the sin on me. The words spilled out, raw and unfiltered, painting pictures of stolen moments and sleepless dawns. Lena was just the latest. A barista from the coffee shop on Main, sweet but fleeting, gone before the guilt could settle. Alara listened without interrupting, her fingers finally brushing mine. a touch so light it might have been the breeze from the cracked window. When I finished, the silence stretched, thick as the humidity that clung to everything in Monroe. "My fiancé," she said at last, the word dropping like a stone into still water. "Or ex-fiancé now, I suppose. Harlan Whitaker. You remember him from that dinner party last month?" I nodded, recalling the broad-shouldered banker with the easy laugh and the family that owned half the land this side of the Red River. They'd been engaged since college, a match made in debutante balls and boardroom handshakes. "I called it off 2 weeks ago. Quietly. Mama thinks it's cold feet. But it's not." She paused, glancing toward the window where rain traced erratic paths down the glass. "It's you, Claire. Or women like you. Like me, if I'd let myself admit it sooner." The confession hung there, fragile as a moth's wing, and in that moment the room shifted. Not with drama or declarations, but with the quiet click of puzzle pieces falling into place. Alara Beaumont, the golden girl of Monroe, unraveling her own threads. We'd shared meals, secrets and fragments, laughter over spilled wine. But this was the undercurrent, the pull I'd felt and dismissed as roommate camaraderie. That night, we didn't touch beyond that tentative brush of fingers. She stood, smoothing her nightgown, and murmured good night from the doorway, leaving me to the echoes of rain and revelation. Sleep came in fits, dreams tangled with memories. My first love's hand in mine under starlit skies, the sting of my father's silence at Thanksgiving. The way Alara's laugh lit up the kitchen like dawn breaking over the plains. By morning the world outside was washed clean, the streets glistening under a reluctant sun, but inside me the storm brewed on. The days that followed blurred into a tentative dance. We'd pass in the hallway, coffee mugs in hand, exchanging glances that held more than small talk. "Pass the sugar," she'd ask, her voice laced with something unspoken, and I'd slide it across the table, our fingers lingering a beat too long. Monroe carried on oblivious. The high school buzzing with football fever as fall deepened, parents herding kids into Sunday services where sermons on purity rang out like warning bells. I taught lessons on To Kill a Mockingbird, drawing parallels to our town's veiled bigotries, watching my students' faces flicker with unformed questions. But at home the air thickened with possibility. One evening, after a staff meeting that dragged into twilight, I found Alara in the living room, curled on the couch with a glass of bourbon. Her father's brand, the label peeling at the edges. The fire she'd lit crackled softly, casting shadows that danced across her face. "Sit," she said, patting the cushion beside her. I did, the leather creaking under me, the warmth of the flames seeping into my bones. We talked then, really talked, peeling back layers like old wallpaper in a house long overdue for renovation. She spoke of Harlan first, the pressure of expectations that had built like a dam since childhood. "He was safe," she admitted, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "The kind of man who fits into Mama's scrapbook of perfect lives. But every time he kissed me it felt like swallowing glass." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I reached for her hand, this time holding on. She didn't pull away. In turn I shared fragments of my own fractures. The summer I spent in Austin after college, chasing freedom in dive bars and poetry slams, only to return to Texas when Mom's cancer diagnosis pulled me back. "She passed last year," I said, the words still sharp-edged. "Dad's remarried now, to someone who bakes pies and doesn't ask about me." The grief mingled with resentment, a cocktail I'd sipped alone until now. As the fire died to embers, Alara leaned her head on my shoulder, her breath steady against my neck. "What if we didn't hide?" she whispered, the question blooming like a secret garden in the dark. I turned, our faces inches apart, the air between us charged with the scent of smoke and possibility. Our lips met then, soft at first, testing the waters of this new current. It wasn't the frantic passion of my night with Lena. It was deeper, a recognition of souls brushing against each other after years adrift. But Monroe wasn't a place for such bloomings. Whispers traveled faster than dust devils across the fields, and Alara's family had eyes everywhere, from the bank tellers to the church ladies who lunched at the diner. The next week brought the first cracks. A phone call from her mother, voice honeyed but insistent, demanding details on the breakup jitters. Alara deflected with practiced grace, but I saw the toll in the shadows under her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she hung up. We stole moments where we could. A walk along the river at dusk, hands brushing as we skipped stones into the current. A midnight drive to the edge of town, windows down, radio crooning Patsy Cline while we sang off-key to drown out the doubts. Each touch built a bridge, fragile but fervent, over the chasm of our fears. Yet doubt gnawed at me, a quiet voice reminding me of the town's unyielding grip. What if her family found out? What if mine, in their distant silence, heard the echoes? The first real fracture came on a crisp October Saturday, when the leaves on the few maples lining Main Street turned the color of old blood, and Monroe prepared for its annual harvest festival, a relic of agrarian pride masking the town's deeper hungers. Elara had insisted we go, her eyes bright with a defiance I'd come to recognize as her armor. "We deserve normal," she'd said that morning, tying a scarf around her neck as if it could ward off the world's gaze. Normal. The word tasted like ash in my mouth, but I nodded, slipping into jeans and a flannel that hid the curve of my collarbone, the one she traced with her fingertips in the quiet hours before dawn. The fairground sprawled along the riverbank, tents flapping in the breeze like surrendered flags, the air thick with the scent of fried dough and caramel apples. Families milled about, children shrieking on hayrides pulled by tractors that belched smoke into the sky. We wandered arm in arm at first, playing the part of easy friends, but the undercurrent pulled us closer. Her thumb grazing my wrist when no one looked, my laugh lingering a fraction too long on her jokes. It felt like a rehearsal for a life we might claim, if only the script allowed it. Then Harlan appeared, materializing from the crowd like a ghost summoned by unfinished business. He was all pressed khakis and easy charm, a solo cup of beer in hand, his smile faltering only slightly when he spotted us. "Elara," he drawled, pulling her into a hug that she endured with stiff politeness. "And Claire, right? The teacher who's got all the kids quoting Shakespeare instead of scripture." His tone was light, but his eyes lingered, appraising, as if he could sense the shift in her orbit. We chatted surface level, weather, the festival's prize pumpkin, the upcoming homecoming game, while tension coiled in my gut like barbed wire. Elara's hand found mine behind our backs, squeezing once, hard enough to ground me. Harlan clapped me on the shoulder before excusing himself, but not before murmuring to Elara, low enough that I caught only fragments. Family's asking. "Give it time." She waved him off, but the color drained from her face as he melted back into the throng. We didn't speak of it until later, huddled in my car parked at the edge of the lot, the engine humming softly against the chill. "He knows something's off," she said, staring out at the twinkling lights of the Midway. "Always has. But he thinks it's me being flighty, not this. Our stolen kisses in the laundry room, the way she'd whisper poetry against my skin, lines from Dickinson she'd memorized just for me. I wanted to rage at the unfairness, at how a man like Harlan could walk through life unburdened, while we navigated minefields disguised as small talk. Instead, I pulled her close, our foreheads touching in the dashboard glow. "Then let's make it ours," I murmured, the words a vow against the encroaching dark. That night, back in the apartment, we lit candles instead of the fire, their flames flickering like conspirators as we moved together on the rug, bodies mapping territories long denied. It was tender, urgent, a reclamation of space in a world that portioned it out stingily. Her sighs filled the room, soft confessions woven into gasps, and for those hours Monroe faded to a distant hum. But reality intruded with the dawn, in the form of a knock that rattled the front door like an unwelcome dawn. Elara's mother, Vivian Beaumont, stood on the porch, pearls gleaming against her cashmere sweater, a Tupperware of pecan pie in hand as camouflage. I hovered in the kitchen, pretending to pour coffee, while Elara faced her in the living room. Vivian's voice carried, polished and probing. Concerns about the engagement, Harlan's heartbreak, subtle jabs at Elara's independent streak, that sounded like warnings wrapped in maternal love. "You're throwing away your future for what?" Vivian pressed, her tone sharpening as Elara deflected. I caught glimpses through the crack in the door. Elara's shoulders tensing, Vivian's manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm. When she left, the pie untouched on the counter, Elara sank to the floor, head in hands. "She suspects," she whispered. "Not us. But that I'm not. Settling." I knelt beside her, wrapping arms around the woman who was becoming my anchor in this sea of pretense. We spent the day in seclusion, binging old movies on the couch, fried green tomatoes, its themes of fierce female bonds hitting too close to home. Laughter came in waves, interspersed with silences heavy with what-ifs. By evening, resolve hardened in us both. We could leave, I suggested, tracing patterns on her palm. Austin's not far. Or Portland, somewhere the air doesn't judge. Her eyes lit with the spark of possibility, but shadows lingered. And what about you? Your job, your students, they need you. She was right. Those kids with their wide eyes and hidden hurts were the one pure thing in Monroe. I'd seen myself in the quiet ones, the ones who doodled in margins instead of raising hands. Leaving meant abandoning that thread of purpose. As weeks folded into November, our rhythm deepened. Mornings brought shared breakfasts, her frying eggs while I brewed tea, conversations meandering from lesson plans to dreams deferred. Evenings were ours. Long baths drawn with lavender salt she'd splurged on, bodies entwined under the spray of the shower, water washing away the day's residue. Intimacy bloomed in the small things. A note slipped into my bag, quoting Ick Cummings, her head in my lap as I read aloud from my journal, words I'd never shared before. Yet the town's tendrils tightened. Whispers reached me at school. A parent inquiring if I was settling down. Code for sniffing out scandals. Harlan cornered Alara at the grocery, his persistence laced with hurt pride. "You're different," he accused one night over dinner he forced upon us, the three of us at a table that felt like a tribunal. "Like you found religion or something." Alara's laugh was brittle, her foot pressing mine under the tablecloth for solace. After he left, we argued for the first time. Not with shouts, but with the quiet barbs of fear. "You should have told him to back off," I said, pacing the kitchen. "Or we tell everyone, rip the bandage." She shook her head, tears glistening. "It's not just us. It's the fallout for you from my family. They'd call you a homewrecker, paint me as confused." The truth stung. In Monroe, love like ours wasn't a story. It was a scandal, fodder for prayer chains and lost invitations. We made up in the dark, apologies murmured against skin, but the seed of doubt took root. I lay awake after, listening to her even breaths, wondering if freedom was a luxury we could afford. Outside, the wind howled through the cotton fields, carrying echoes of old songs about lost loves and lonesome pines, ballads that mirrored our fragile melody. Thanksgiving loomed like a specter, families gathering in parlors heavy with turkey and tension. Alara's invitation to the Beaumont feast was a formality, laced with expectations of reconciliation. Mine from my father in Austin arrived as a postcard. Tables set. Bring pie. No mention of the empty chair that had been mine for years. We decided to forge our own. A quiet meal at home, candles and cranberry sauce. Toast to the life we were sketching in stolen ink. But on the eve, crisis knocked unannounced. Vivian arrived uninvited, Harlan in tow, bearing casseroles and ultimatums disguised as concern. "We're family," she declared, sweeping into the living room as if it were her own. Alara froze in the doorway, me trailing behind like a shadow. The confrontation unfolded in measured tones, pleas for Alara to think of her future. Harlan's wounded gaze fixed on her, Vivian's subtle glances assessing me as the interloper. It escalated when Alara, voice steady for the first time, declared, "There is no future with Harlan. Not for me." Silence fell, thick as fog off the river. Vivian's face crumpled, not in anger but sorrow. "What have you gotten into, child?" she whispered, eyes flicking to me with dawning horror. Harlan stormed out, the door slamming like a final judgment. In the aftermath, Alara wept in my arms, the weight of shattered legacies pressing down. "I chose us," she sobbed, and in that raw admission, our bond solidified, tempered in the fire of confrontation. As snow dusted the ground for the first time that season, rare for these parts, we held each other, whispering plans for escape, for a world beyond Monroe's grasp. Winter settled over Monroe like a shroud, the rare snow blanketing the fields in deceptive purity, muffling the creaks of old houses and the murmurs of old grudges. Christmas lights strung along sagging porches twinkled against the cold, a festive mask over the fractures beneath. Alara and I navigated our days with cautious joy, each glance a stolen gift, each touch a defiance wrapped in woolen scarves. But the confrontation with her family had cracked the facade. Invitations dried up, stares lingered at the post office, and Harlan's absence loomed like a grudge unspoken. School broke for holidays, leaving me adrift in the apartment's hush. I graded final essays by the window, watching flakes drift past like errant thoughts, while Alara buried herself in job applications, graphic design gigs in Austin, remote freelance that promised escape without severance. "We're building a bridge," she'd say, her fingers flying over her laptop keys, determination etching lines around her mouth that made her seem older, wiser, unbreakable. One afternoon, as gray light filtered through frost-laced panes, she pulled me into the kitchen for a ritual we'd invented. Hot cider spiced with cinnamon and secrets. "Remember that summer in Vermont you told me about?" she asked, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon scarred from years of Beaumont suppers. I nodded, recalling the college program where I'd first tasted freedom. Hikes through green mountains, nights in cabins with women who wore their truths like badges. "Let's go there. After New Year's. Just us, no maps, no timelines." The idea ignited something dormant in me. A spark against the chill. We planned in whispers. Amtrak tickets to Burlington, a rented cabin on Lake Champlain, days of skating on frozen waters and nights tangled in quilts. It felt like a dream scripted for the screen. Two women fleeing the South's sticky embrace for the North's crisp absolution. But dreams have underbellies, and mine surfaced in a letter from my father, slipped under the door like contraband. "Claire," it began, his handwriting steady as ever. "Your mother's grave is quiet this time of year. Thought you might want to visit. Doors open. No questions about my life, no acknowledgement of the silence I'd endured. It was an olive branch or a hook, hard to tell in the Beaumont shadow that now colored everything." Alara read it over my shoulder, her breath catching. "Go," she urged. "For you. I'll hold the fort." I resisted at first, the pull of old wounds too sharp. But closure whispered promises, and so I boarded the Greyhound to Austin on a day when the sun mocked the snow with its indifference. The bus rumbled south, past flatlands dusted white, my reflection in the window a mosaic of doubt. Austin greeted me with its familiar sprawl. Hills rolling under winter haze, the Capitol dome glinting like a false beacon. Dad met me at the station, his truck idling curbside, face weathered but kind in its creases. The drive to the ranch was silent at first, radio tuned low to Willie Nelson crooning about blue eyes crying in the rain. We stopped at Mom's grave in the small cemetery outside town, stones etched with names that span generations. I knelt in the thin snow, tracing her epitaph. "Beloved wife, devoted mother." The words blurring with tears I hadn't shed in months. Dad stood back, hands in pockets, until I rose. "Missed you," he said gruffly, and in those two words a dam broke. Over coffee at the kitchen table that night, truths trickled out. He spoke of his remarriage to June, a quiet woman who gardened and asked no questions. "She knows about you," he admitted. "Told me once it didn't change a thing." My turn came haltingly. Tales of Monroe's smallness, the job that fed my soul but starved my spirit. Alara's name slipping in like a confession. Dad's face tightened, not in revulsion but regret. "I failed you after Riley," he said. Thought space would heal, but it just widened the gap. We parted with a hug that lingered, promises exchanged like fragile heirlooms. Returning to Monroe felt like resurfacing from deep water, lungs burning with clarity. Alara waited at the station, her coat dusted with fresh snow, arms enveloping me before words could form. "He came around," I murmured against her hair, and she pulled back, eyes searching mine. That night we celebrated with takeout tamales and a bottle of cheap Merlot, toasting to mended bridges and uncharted roads. New Year's Eve dawned brittle cold. The town hunkered down against a nor'easter that howled in from the plains. We packed lightly, backpacks stuffed with thermoses and trail mix, dreams outweighing necessities. The train station was a ghost town, our platform empty save for a lone conductor stamping his feet. As the Amtrak pulled in, silver and sleek against the white expanse, excitement thrummed between us like a shared pulse. The journey north unfolded like chapters in a novel. Oklahoma's red earth giving way to Missouri's rolling hills, Illinois flats stretching under leaden skies. We claimed a cafe car table, knees touching under Formica, trading stories to pass the miles. Alara confessed childhood rebellions, sneaking out to bonfires where she danced too close to girls with firefly laughs, only to retreat under her father's watchful eye. I countered with my Austin escapades, the poetry collective where verses dripped with desire, unjudged. By nightfall, snow blanketed the tracks, turning the world into a monochrome dream. In our sleeper compartment, the train's lullaby rocked us into intimacy, bodies aligning in the narrow berth, breath syncing with the rail's click-clack. Her fingers traced constellations on my back, naming stars after our fears. Betelgeuse for Vivian's sorrow, Sirius for Harlan's pride. Laughter mingled with sighs, a symphony of release. Vermont welcomed us with biting winds and a sky like polished slate, Burlington's brick streets crunching under boots. Our cabin perched on the lake's edge, logs weathered by decades of nor'easters, a stone fireplace yawning invitingly. We arrived at dusk, unpacking with the efficiency of co-conspirators, then ventured out for skates rented from a nearby shop. The lake was a vast mirror, cracked but unyielding, and we glided hand in hand, spins and falls dissolving into giggles that echoed across the ice. Days blurred into a tapestry of firsts, cross-country skis through pine groves heavy with frost, mugs of maple syrup steaming on the stove, nights where the fire's glow painted our skin in amber hues. One evening as aurora whispers teased the horizon, a rare southern reach, we bundled on the porch, wrapped in a shared blanket. "This could be us," Elara said, her voice fierce against the cold. "Anywhere. Always." I kissed her then, slow and sure, sealing the pact with the taste of possibility. But even idols carry shadows. A phone call from Vivian pierced the bubble on our third day. Elara's voice tightening as she assured her mother of just a girl's trip. Harlan had been sighted at the Beaumonts, spinning tales of Elara's wild phase. The call ended with pleas for return, for sense, leaving Elara withdrawn, staring at the lake as if it held answers. We mended with motion. A hike up a trail blanketed in powder, the crunch of snow underfoot a counterpoint to our silence. At the summit, overlooking valleys cradled in white, she turned to me, tears freezing on her lashes. "I can't lose them," she admitted. "But I won't lose this." The confession cracked me open, vulnerability mirroring my own tug-of-war with roots and wings. Back in the cabin, we confronted the specter head-on. Over stew simmered with venison from the local market, we mapped contingencies. Part-time remote work for me, her design portfolio pitching to progressive firms. "Slow steps," I proposed, "until the path clears." She nodded, resolve flickering back to life, and we sealed it with a dance. Slow turns in the living room to the radio's crackle, bodies swaying to Joan Baez's haunting timbre. The return trip south carried a new weight, the landscape inverting from pristine whites to thawing browns, as if the world itself mourned the transition. Monroe loomed on the horizon, its spires and silos a reminder of battles rejoined. We stepped off the train into a drizzle that turned slush to mud, arms linked defiantly as we walked home. Vivian waited on our porch unannounced, her fur-trimmed coat a stark contrast to the peeling paint. No accusations this time, just quiet resolve. "Come for dinner," she said, eyes flicking between us with newfound wariness. Elara hesitated, then agreed, pulling me along. The Beaumont dining room gleamed with silver and crystal, Harlan absent, the table set for three. Conversation skirted edges. Whether Elara's vacation, my teaching anecdotes. But undercurrents swirled, Vivian's probing glances, Elara's hand finding mine under the damask cloth. As pie was served, pecan her specialty, Vivian set down her fork. "I see how you look at each other," she said softly. "Like my sister looked at hers, before she left for California and never came back." The admission hung, a bridge extended from grief's far shore. No blessing, no condemnation, just a weary acknowledgement. We left with hugs that felt tentative, the door closing on a chapter not ended but evolving. In the weeks that followed, our love deepened amid the thaw. Spring crept in with dogwoods blooming pink against the mud, symbolizing fragile resurrections. Elara landed a freelance gig with an Austin ad agency, her sketches of empowered women earning praise that bolstered her spirit. I incorporated more diverse voices into my curriculum, watching students bloom under narratives that mirrored their hidden selves. Yet tension simmered. Harlan's glares at the diner, parents' sidelong looks at open house. One night, after a school board meeting where family values curricula were debated, I came home to find Elara packing boxes, trial runs for our eventual move. "Not yet," she soothed, "but soon." We made love then, fierce and reclaiming, bodies affirming what words couldn't always hold. Summer's heat arrived early, turning the air thick as molasses, and with it, the festival of reckonings. The county fair, bigger than harvests, drew crowds from neighboring towns, a carnival of cotton candy and concealed sins. We attended as a unit, hands clasped openly now, testing the waters. Whispers followed, but so did nods from unlikely allies. A librarian who'd read my essays, a shopkeeper with a rainbow pin discreet on her apron. Harlan confronted us there, under the Ferris wheel's lazy arc, his face flushed with beer and bitterness. "You're ruining her," he snarled at me, voice low to avoid spectacle. Alara stepped forward, chin lifted. "No one's ruined. We're just real." He recoiled, stalking away, but the seed of true conflict was sown. July's sun beat down on Monroe like a relentless interrogator, baking the earth until cracks spiderwebbed the fields, mirroring the fissures in our fragile peace. The fair's aftermath lingered in awkward silences at the market, where cashiers avoided eye contact and old friends crossed streets to evade greetings. Alara threw herself into her work, screens glowing late into nights, her designs a canvas for the freedom she craved. I mirrored her with summer reading lists for my students, curating stories of outcasts and triumphs. Giovanni's room, ruby fruit jungle, hoping to plant seeds in fertile young minds. But Harlan's confrontation festered, a poison seeping into the town's veins. It started small. Anonymous notes slipped under our door, scripture verses on tolerance twisted into threats. "Sodom's shadow falls," one read, the paper creased from nervous hands. Alara burned them in the sink, flames licking up the words like absolution, but fear took root, twining around our mornings. Vivian became an unlikely buffer, inviting us to Sunday lunches where conversations danced around the elephant: politics, recipes, the river's rising levels from upstream rains. Her acceptance was tentative, a truce born of loss. She'd lost a sister to similar silences decades ago. The family lore, a cautionary tale whispered at reunions. "Don't make me bury another," she'd say, her eyes on Alara, pleading more than demanding. One sweltering afternoon, as thunderheads gathered like conspirators on the horizon, Harlan appeared at the school, waiting by my classroom door after a volunteer session for the literacy program. Sweat beaded on his brow, his polo shirt clinging damply, but his posture was ramrod straight. "We need to talk," he said, voice clipped, glancing down the empty hall. I nodded warily, gesturing to my desk cluttered with book orders. He paced as he spoke, words tumbling like rocks in a landslide. "You think you're saving her? Dragging her into your lifestyle?" The disdain curled around lifestyle like smoke, but I held steady, channeling the poise I'd honed in parent conferences. "Alara's her own woman," I replied. "Always has been." His laugh was bitter, echoing off cinderblock walls. "You don't know the Beaumonts. Or the Whitakers. This town's built on alliances, not whims." He leaned in, breath sour with coffee. "Break it off. Quietly. Or I'll make sure your contract isn't renewed come fall." The threat landed heavy, a gauntlet thrown in the dust of my ambitions. Teaching wasn't just a job. It was my tether. The one place I shaped futures without apology. I escorted him out, heart pounding, the slam of the door a punctuation to his exit. That evening, over iced tea on the porch swing, its chains groaning in the breeze, I told Alara. Her face paled, then flushed with anger. "He wouldn't," she breathed, but doubt shadowed her eyes. Harlan's family held sway. Bank loans, council seats, the kind of influence that could choke a career with a signature. We debated late into the night, ceiling fan whirring overhead like a conspirator's whisper. Confront him? Ignore it? Flee now midsummer with half-packed boxes and unfinished goodbyes? Exhaustion won, pulling us into uneasy sleep, dreams haunted by chains and unraveling threads. Dawn brought resolve, fragile as morning mist. We drove to the Whitaker Ranch at first light, the gravel drive crunching under tires, horses nickering in distant pastures. Harlan met us on the veranda, overalls dusted with hay, surprise flickering before hardening. Alara led, voice steady. "This ends. No threats, no games." He scoffed, but Vivian's intervention, from a distance via a phone call to his mother, hastened his retreat. A shaky peace held but trust eroded, a crack in our foundation. August arrived with monsoons that turned roads to rivers, confining us indoors. The rains mirrored our moods, torrential one moment, drizzling doubt the next. Alara's freelance dried up, clients spooked by small-town drama, leaking through networks. My own whispers grew. A colleague's hesitant question about personal matters after a parent's complaint. We clung tighter, intimacy a refuge. Lazy afternoons in bed, limbs entwined, conversations delving into childhood scars. She shared tales of her aunt, the family exile who'd thrived in San Francisco, sending postcards of golden bridges and unapologetic parades. I countered with Mom's hidden kindnesses. The way she'd slip me books with queer heroines, winking as if sharing a code. Yet isolation bred paranoia. A flat tire on a grocery run felt sabotaged. A hang-up call at midnight carried Harlan's cadence. We installed a deadbolt, its click a nightly ritual of fortification. Vivian's visits increased, bearing casseroles and counsel, stories of her own youth, a college flirtation with a roommate cut short by societal scissors. "Love's a river," she said one evening, stirring gumbo on our stove. "Sometimes you build a dam. Sometimes you let it flood." Her words lingered as fall semester beckoned. My classroom filling with returning faces eager for sonnets and stories. Alara shadowed me one day, volunteering to shelve books, her presence a quiet rebellion. Students noticed, the girl with the sharp wit asking about those two ladies in the movie we watched. Eyes wide with curiosity. I answered honestly within bounds, planting seeds of empathy in parched soil. Harlan's next move came slyly. A petition circulated at the church, calling for values-aligned educators, my name unspoken but implied in sidelong glances. The school board summoned me, a closed-door meeting in the superintendent's office, air thick with coffee and caution. "Concerns from the community," he hedged, avoiding my eyes. "Nothing official. But tread light." Rage simmered as I drove home, rain lashing the windshield like accusations. Alara waited with open arms, but the embrace felt strained, our sanctuary shrinking. That night, over a dinner of takeout burgers, greasy comfort, we confronted the crossroads. "We leave," she declared, voice breaking the bread of indecision. "Now, before it swallows us." Packing commenced in earnest, boxes labeled with destinations. Austin for me, perhaps Portland for her, or a compromise in Nashville's nascent scene. Goodbyes loomed, letters to students, a final lunch with Vivian, who pressed an envelope into Alara's hand. For the road. No strings. Inside, cash and a note. Be brave like she was. But betrayal brewed in the shadows. On our last night in Monroe, as thunder rumbled farewell, a knock shattered the quiet. Harlan, soaked and wild-eyed, pushed past Alara into the living room. "You think you can just vanish?" he roared, phone in hand, screen glowing with photos, blurry shots of us at the fair, on the porch, timestamps damning. "I hired someone. Proof for the board, for her family. End it or it goes public." Alara's face drained of color, mine igniting with fury. "Blackmail." I spat, stepping forward. He laughed hollow. "Protection. For the town. For what she deserves." The room spun, our dreams crashing like the storm outside. Alara snatched the phone, deleting files with trembling fingers, but copies lingered, a digital specter. He left with a warning. 24 hours. The door banging shut behind him. We collapsed together, sobs mingling with rain's relentless drum. Betrayal cut deepest from within. Harlan, once a suitor, now saboteur. His pain weaponized by the very norms he'd sworn to uphold. "I chose wrong," Alara whispered, guilt threading her words. "Brought this poison home." Dawn found us resolute, bags by the door, a U-Haul rented for Dawn's light. Vivian arrived unbidden. Sensing the fracture, her embrace fierce. "Go," she urged. "And take this town's heart with you, the good parts." No judgment, only a mother's quiet revolution. As we loaded the truck, Monroe stirred awake. Neighbors peeking from curtains, the river murmuring approval. Harlan's truck idled at the corner. A final vigil, but he didn't approach. We drove out as the sun crested, hands clasped over the gearshift, the rear view shrinking the town to a postcard of what was. The road stretched north, but the Wound wept. Alara's silence spoke volumes. Regret for the family she'd wounded, the legacy she'd upended. My own doubts surfaced. Had I lured her into this chaos, my queerness a siren call to her sheltered shores? Stops came at diners with neon signs flickering promises, coffee bitter as unresolved grief. One night in a motel outside Dallas, neon buzzing outside the window, she broke. "What if it's not enough?" she cried, curled against me. "What if they win?" I held her through the storm, words my only shield. Tales of survivors, Audre Lorde's fire. the women who'd carved paths through worse. Dawn brought tentative peace, a decision to detour west, New Mexico's Red Rocks, a reset in Taos, where artists gathered like exiles. Interstate 40 unspooled westward like a vein pulsing with escape, the flatlands of Texas yielding to New Mexico's jagged horizons, where mesas rose like ancient sentinels under skies vast enough to swallow regrets. The U-Haul lumbered behind our rented sedan, a metal beast hauling not just belongings but the detritus of Monroe, scrapbooks half-burned, letters creased from rereading, Ilara's mother's gumbo recipe scrawled on a napkin as talisman. We'd chosen Taos on a whim, drawn by whispers of its artistic enclave. Adobe homes huddled in pinyon groves, galleries brimming with canvases that screamed silent revolutions. A place where souls like ours might breathe without apology. The drive took 3 days, punctuated by catnaps in rest stops and diners where waitresses poured refills without questions. Ilara softened mile by mile, her playlist shifting from mournful ballads to Lucinda Williams' anthems of gritty redemption. I drove mostly windows cracked to let in the desert wind, its dry kiss scouring away the humidity of old fears. Conversations meandered. Dreams of opening a bookstore cafe, her designs gracing its walls, my readings drawing crowds hungry for stories untold. Taos welcomed us with a adobe duplex on the outskirts, rented sight unseen through a harried agent. Sagebrush scraping the walls, mountains looming like protective elders. Unpacking felt ceremonial. Books shelved by theme, Ilara's sketchpads claiming the sunlit studio. Our bed centered in the bedroom like a hearth. That first night, as coyotes yipped in the distance, we made love with the fervor of survivors. Slow explorations that mapped new territories, her gasps echoing off Vegas beams, my whispers affirming our reclamation. Days settled into rhythm, tentative as spring shoots. I found work at the local community college, adjuncting literature courses to wide-eyed adults chasing second acts. Veterans, retirees, dreamers derailed. Ilara networked at art walks, her portfolio catching eyes. Bold lines depicting women entwined in landscapes of liberation, sold to tourists seeking souvenirs of spirit. Income trickled, enough for groceries and gas, the rest bartered in community swaps, poetry for pottery, sketches for storytelling. Yet the high of flight crashed against isolation's shore. Nights brought dreams of Monroe. Harlan's sneer morphing into my father's averted gaze. Vivian's hug dissolving into dust. Ilara withdrew into her work, sketches darkening. Figures fractured by shadows, colors bleeding into bruised tones. "It's nothing," she'd say when I asked, but her eyes betrayed the lie, haunted by the family she'd orphaned. One evening as monsoon rains lashed the tin roof, a desert deluge that turned arroyos to torrents, she shattered the dam. We sat on the portal, mugs of chamomile steaming, thunder rumbling like distant artillery. "I called Mama," she confessed, voice barely audible over the downpour. 2 weeks ago. From a payphone in Santa Fe. My stomach nodded, unbidden jealousy mingling with hurt. What did she say? Tears carved paths down her cheeks, mingling with raindrops on the adobe. "She cried," said Harlan, spreading stories. "Me as the tragic figure, you as the seductress. The family's divided. Cousins whispering support, aunts clutching pearls. The words eviscerated, painting us as villains in our own exodus. She'd hidden the call, fearing it would unravel our fragile weave. Betrayal stung fresh, not from intent, but from the chasm it revealed. Her tether to roots I'd severed long ago. "Why not tell me?" I pressed, voice cracking. "We're in this together." She reached for my hand, slick with rain. "Because you're my future. She's my past. And I can't lose either without bleeding." The argument that followed was our fiercest yet. Words hurled like lightning, illuminating fractures. I accused her of 1 foot in each world, hedging bets against regret. She fired back, my independence a wall she'd scaled only to find barbed wire. Hours passed in the storm's fury, accusations exhausting into sobs, until we collapsed on the damp cushions, limbs entangled in truce. Dawn brought contrition, apologies brewed stronger than coffee. We vowed transparency, no secrets, no solo bridges to the past. To seal it, a road trip deeper into the wild. Up to the Rio Grande Gorge, its chasm a mirror to our depths. We hiked the rim trail, winds whipping hair like flags of surrender, pausing at overlooks where the river snaked silver below. At the bridge's span we stopped, hands gripping railings slick with spray. "Jump with me," Alara joked, but her eyes held the dare. Into the unknown together. Back in Taos, reinvention accelerated. I joined a writer's circle at the local co-op, sharing essays on queer Southern Gothic, tales of magnolia-veiled longings, that drew nods and invitations to read at open mics. Alara exhibited at a gallery crawl, her pieces fetching prices that widened our eyes, whispers of a solo show floating like sage smoke. Community enveloped us. Potlucks with potters and painters, queer hikes where stories swapped like trail mix. Vivian's letter arrived in October, postmarked Monroe, envelope heavy with enclosures. Alara opened it trembling. I beside her on the kitchen floor amid spilled mail. I'm proud, it began, Vivian's script elegant as ever. Not of the pain but the courage. Harlan's moved on, engaged to a girl from Dallas, the scandal buried under wedding china. Photos tumbled out, the Beaumont table at Thanksgiving, an empty chair with a place card. For Alara and Claire. No invitation but a gesture, space held open. Tears flowed freely, catharsis washing clean the residue of flight. She's trying, Alara murmured, clutching the letter like a lifeline. We framed the photo, hanging it in the studio as sentinel. Winter dusted the Sangre de Cristo's white, holidays approached with less ache. We hosted a solstice gathering, friends from the circle, mulled wine and Yule logs crackling. Laughter filled the rooms, toasts to outgrowing shells. That night, under star-pricked skies, we danced on the frozen patio, breaths clouding in the cold, bodies warm in reunion. Spring thawed the high desert, wildflowers erupting in riots of color. Paintbrush red as redemption, Columbine nodding like confidants. Alara's show opened to acclaim, her artist statement a manifesto. Love as landscape, untamed, unapologetic. I read at a festival, my piece on Monroe's ghost drawing applause that healed old wounds. But Harlan's shadow lengthened unexpectedly. A package arrived, anonymous, containing a USB drive and a note. Truth sets free. Or destroys. Heart-pounding, we plugged it in. Videos from Monroe, grainy but damning. Us at the fair, whispers from neighbors, Vivian's tearful church confession defending us. Harlan's voiceover narrated bitter. See what you've wrought. Rage and fear collided, a maelstrom. He's unhinged, I said, ejecting the drive. Alara nodded, but vulnerability cracked her. What if he sends it to the college? Your job. The threat circled vulture-like, endangering the life we'd stitched from scraps. We reported it to Taos PD, a weary officer taking notes on small-town vendettas. Restraining order filed, but distance offered scant shield. Sleepless nights followed, Alara pacing like a caged cat, me drafting resignation letters in my head. Community rallied. The writers' group pooling legal advice, gallery owners offering alibis. Climax crested in June, heat waves shimmering mirages. Harlan's truck was sighted in Santa Fe. Queries at motels tracing a path north. Panic peaked when my phone rang. Unknown number, his voice slurred. Can't run forever, Claire. She's mine by blood. Click. We barricaded doors, called friends for watches. The duplex a fortress under siege. The confrontation came at dusk, his silhouette at our gate, eyes wild under the porch light. Alara faced him, me behind with phone recording. Leave, she commanded, voice steel. Or face charges. He ranted, loss, betrayal, the town's ruin. But Vivian's intervention, driving up in her sedan, defused the bomb. Enough, Harlan, she said, stepping between, her presence a wall of maternal steel. You've grieved your fill. He crumpled, sobs racking his frame, the fight draining like pus from a wound. Police arrived, escorting him away, the restraining order invoked. In the aftermath, Vivian stayed, brewing tea with hands that shook only slightly. He'll heal, she said. As we all must. Exhaustion claimed us, collapse into arms that held without question. Betrayal's blade had twisted deep, but withdrawal brought clarity. Our love, scarred but surviving, a testament to resilience. Summer's zenith passed in Taos like a fever dream breaking. The air cooling to breaths of relief as monsoon greens faded to autumn golds. Harlan's arrest made local news. A brief blip on vindictive exes crossing state lines. But for us, it marked Nadir's turn. Counseling sessions at the community center unpacked the trauma. His obsession a mirror to societal toxins, our flight a necessary excision. Alara sketched through it, abstracts of rupture and repair. jagged lines softening to curves, colors from bruise to bloom. Vivian's visits became anchors, her rental car crunching gravel monthly, bearing stories of Monroe's slow metamorphosis. The church splintered, progressives forming a new fellowship, my old students sending emails, essays inspired by Ms. Hargrove's fire. Dad called too, voice warmer, inviting us to Austin for holidays. June included. She's got a mean brisket. Roots once severed sent tentative shoots. We deepened into Taos, the town weaving us into its tapestry. My adjunct role expanded to full-time. A tenure track glinting on the horizon, classrooms alive with debates on identity's intersections. Alara's gallery show toured, landing in Albuquerque, her name whispered in art circles as the Southern Surrealist. Income steadied, allowing indulgences. A kiln for her ceramics, a trip to the Grand Canyon where we scattered symbolic ashes. Monroe's notes, Harlan's drive, into the wind-whipped void. Intimacy evolved, no longer refuge but celebration. Mornings dawned with coffee shared on the portal, her head on my shoulder as we watched Hawksville overhead. Evenings brought rituals. Readings from new chapbooks, her fingers in my hair as I recited, bodies following words into languid dances. Doubt's embers flickered occasionally. Alara's midnight sighs for lost kin, my flinches at unexpected knocks, but we fanned them with honesty, conversations like rain replenishing parched earth. Fall brought a pilgrimage east, our first return. We flew into Dallas, rented a car for the drive to Monroe, the landscape unfolding familiar yet altered. Cotton fields harvested to stubble, billboards preaching less fire. Vivian waited at the old Victorian, arms open, the house aired of ghosts. Dinner was a quiet affair. Gumbo simmering, stories swapped like heirlooms. No Harlan. He'd relocated to Houston, therapy his rumored companion. The next day we visited the river, its waters low and lazy, skipping stones as in stolen summers past. Alara spoke to the current, apologies and absolutions murmured to the flow. I added my own, for the girl I'd buried under pretense. Vivian joined later, a picnic spread on checkered cloth. Deviled eggs, her specialty. You've built something, she said, eyes tracing our clasped hands. Stronger than what I gave. We drove to my parents' ranch under harvest moon, stars pricking the velvet sky. Dad enveloped us in bear hugs, June's brisket melting on tongues, conversations meandering to family lore untainted by silence. "'Bout time," he grunted over pie, nodding at Alara. Laughter bubbled, easy as the creek behind the barn, mending threads I'd thought frayed forever. Return to Taos carried ballast of belonging. No longer fugitives but pilgrims. Winter solstice found us hosting again. The duplex aglow with luminarias, friends toasting evolutions. Alara unveiled a new piece, a diptych. One panel fractured south, the other radiant mesa, figures bridging the divide in embrace. "For us," she whispered as applause faded, her kiss sealing the dedication. Spring heralded commitments unspoken yet profound. On a hike to Williams Lake, snowmelt cascading in silver threads, Alara knelt. Not in proposal but offering. A ring forged from her silver sketches, twisted vines symbolizing growth. "Forever's a choice," she said, sliding it on. I mirrored with a pendant, a locket holding Vivian's note and Dad's postcard. Vows exchanged in whispers, witnessed by pines and the lake's quiet lap. Summer swelled with fruition. My first book contract arrived. Essays on queer Southern resilience, Taos's coda. Alara's Taos studio expanded. Apprentices learning her lines of liberation. Monroe faded to fond ache. Visits annual now. Vivian's health a gentle decline we tended with calls and care packages. One August eve as Perseides streaked the dome above, we lay on a blanket in the backyard, sage smoke curling from a smudge bowl. "What now?" Alara mused, head pillowed on my chest. I traced constellations, naming them anew. Orion as our trials, Cassiopeia our triumphs. "Now we live," I replied, the words a creed carved in starlight. Years folded like pages in an open book, chapters of quiet revolutions. Children entered our orbit, not ours by blood but mentored. A runaway teen finding shelter in our spare room, blooming into artist. Students turned colleagues, carrying our fire forward. Vivian passed in her sleep one winter, legacy a quilt of acceptance stitched in final letters. "Love as you loved, fiercely free." In her honor we returned to Monroe for burial, the town transformed. Pride flags settle on porches, a plaque at the river for hidden histories. Harlan attended sober and subdued, a nod exchanged, enemies evolved to echoes. Our story, once by kitsch of barriers, became ballad of breakthrough. Two women, forged in South's crucible, thriving in West's wide embrace. Society's maw had gaped, but we slipped through, hands linked, hearts unbowed. In Tause's adobe hush, under skies that held no judgments, we wrote the ending, not with fanfare, but the steady ink of lives entwined, a testament that love in its truest form outlasts the chains that seek to bind it. The river runs on, carrying our truths to seas unseen, a current of humaneness whispering, "Be brave, be whole, be home."